It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Christine Mainquist Wiggum. She is a veterinarian with Pillen Family Farms and DNA Genetics. She serves as health director for their 70,000 commercial sows in the downstream nursery and finish systems, as well as the DNA Genetics nucleus herd. She earned her BS in biochemistry and molecular biology from Nebraska Wesleyan in 2012, followed by her DVM from Iowa State University in 2016. Christine currently resides in Columbus, Nebraska with her husband and son. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mainquist Wiggum.
Sorry, I should have looked this up ahead of time. Okay. Thank you. All right, well, really excited to be here today. We've done a lot of work with Jason's group in the past and spent a lot of time looking at livability. So go into our system in a little bit, but really wanting to look at it all the way from, the gilt, to the sow, to the nursery, to the finisher. This talk today is going to focus pretty heavily on the nursery. But I think it'll be really good to show the strategies we use, the processes that we use to attack livability in our system. So just a brief overview of what I'm going to cover. We'll kind of give you the 1,000-foot view of Pillen Family Farms, and then touch on our concerns, so livability concerns. So most of the talk, again, will be on growing pigs, specifically nursery performance. And then if we've got time, I'll just touch on sow mortality and gilt development and the processes we've done there. So specifically with these growing pigs, we looked at all aspects with our approach, including health, nutrition, utilizing technology to solve these problems, environment, and then different pig management strategies. So then, if we've got time, we'll touch on the female livability piece and then just hit on our take-homes. So Pillen Family Farms, we are a approximately 75,000 sow commercial system based out of Columbus, Nebraska. So most of our sow farms would be within a couple hours of Columbus, ranging anywhere from 1,000 sows up to 11,000 sows. Historically, we were a sow company, really focused on sow production. And then, early to mid, 2000 to 2012, the next generation of Pillens moved home, became Pillen Family Farms, and really wanted to work on being a fully integrated system. So started retaining more pigs, finishing out more pigs, and at that time made the decision to invest in facilities for growing pigs. So nursery facilities specifically added, I'd have to check, but somewhere around 10 barns of 12,000 head per barn within a 3-year span of this time. So significant investment in facilities for nursery performance. So right now we're finishing out around 2 million pigs, and again, almost all nursery finish. We'd have a few wean to finish barns, but 98% would be nursery finish. So we'd have large sites. I don't know if anyone's been through our system, but Nebraska, we build things large. So most of our sites are anywhere from 12,000 to 20,000 head. To fill those sites, do a lot of commingling, so get a lot of bugs all mixed together, a lot of sources mixed together to accomplish this, and then running sites all in, all out. So again, if we've got time, I'll then hit on what this looks like in our gilts, and since we receive all of our gilts as isoweans, applying the same concepts to commercial pigs as our isoween gilts. So our primary concern, we built these new nursery facilities, felt like we should be having really good performance, and just weren't seeing it. So our nursery pigs, we were having higher than expected mortality on flows that we thought should be healthy. PERS negative or PERS stable flows, just higher mortality than we wanted. We also saw some issues that first 10 days. They're a little slow to get feeders, maybe more fallouts than we had anticipated, but that first 10 days, it just seemed like they weren't getting the care or the start that we had expected. And then because of those two, we were seeing a lot of enteric issues. So whether that was mostly rotavirus, maybe some E. coli, but really struggling with enteric challenges. So really wanted to focus our efforts on those 3 points. How do we address that and improve livability with that? So then, if we've got time, hit on female livability, specifically sow mortality and pelvic organ prolapse, and then our story of gilt development to solve that problem. So to hit on our wean pig performance, I think the main point I'd like to hit home is this approach. So maybe the things that work for us aren't going to work for everybody else, but this approach is what was key for us to identify, hey, this works for us or this doesn't work for us. So being from Nebraska and with Jim Pillen and his Cornhusker roots, everything's football analogy, and so we took the blocking and tackling approach of, hey, we're going to work through this, and it's going to be a lot of hours and a lot of time, but we're going to solve it. So we went with an elimination diet approach. Jim one day said, enough's enough, we got to get to the root cause and strip everything back and kind of add things back in and see what happens. So we removed everything. We would slowly add back in an intervention or some type of strategy and then evaluate. We had a nutritionist on our team who was extremely detailed, and he kept a record, and having this record allowed us to go back and look at our interventions and what made a difference or what didn't. This is all field data, field research, so this isn't a controlled setting. We have to know what we did when to be able to see, did our intervention make a difference? So the amount of detail that went into this, every single week here was a nursery group, and it's really small, but every single intervention and week by week mortality was being tracked on this sheet. We could go back then and check our records, but without this, I don't think we would have had the success that we had. Fourth point would be being cutting edge, not bleeding edge. We did have to adopt some technology to assist with this, and I think you'll find it was a really cool investment and a nice way to see, hey, what's actually going on in the barns. We made a lot of interventions due to this adoption of technology. And then lastly, just not being satisfied. So, hey, we made a 1% improvement in mortality, awesome. No, not awesome. We got to keep going, we got to keep improving. So this is a multi-year story. So story begins in 2016. So that was when the nurseries had been completed, the performance wasn't there, and we were over-medicating, running a ton of different products, just protocols were all over the board, and there was absolutely no rhyme or reason to what we were doing. So at that point, Jim said, we're pulling it all. All feed meds came out. So feed meds came out of the nursery diets, finishing diets, sow diets, gilt diets, everything was done. Still did injectable treatments, but all of our mass water treatments were done. The diet reevaluated that and said, hey, do we really need to be spending X amount of dollars on these pigs? We stripped it down and did a much simpler diet. So 2016 was a tough year, and I'll show you on the next slides kind of what the year looked like week by week. But at a 4.5% mortality, we were not satisfied. So these are our owned sites, our new nurseries. And there's maybe a little bit of PRRS mixed in here too, but we felt we should be doing under 2%. So that was our goal. We did some changes through 2016. 2017 was a big year of a lot of changes. You could see that downward trend. And then finally, 2018, spent more time fine-tuning those management practices. So we've really stayed in that, upper 2s to 3% mortality, PRRS included, through these practices. So I'll go through these on the graphs too, but kind of to hit on the key points, what we did. Week 20 of 2016, all feed grade antibiotics were removed. We went 20 weeks with that and said this isn't sustainable. So week 40, we did make some diet changes. 2017, reevaluated our sow farms. We pulled feed meds out of there too. So decided, hey, we need to, through diagnostics and things, add in a medication at our sow farm. Week 20, we tackled sanitation with a detergent application. Week 34, we switched the timing of our piglet vaccines. And then week 48, started using some technology to address ventilation and air management. So jumping into 2018, the entire year was spent with management practices and ventilation. Week 3 started implementing some sow herd closures just for stability of the population, PRRS, mycoplasma, you name it. That was when we started addressing that. And then week 20, we pulled our PRRS vaccine from the nursery. So this just illustrates our weekly death loss for these sites. Really highly variable beginning of 2016, but you can see the feed meds were probably doing something. So when we pulled everything out, saw about a 2 to 3% increase in mortality. And then putting that feed, adding that feed complexity back in, definitely saw a benefit, but really just kind of back to where we were. So the things that we added in the diet that made a difference were adding a plasma product. So at that time it was bovine plasma. We'd have some still on bovine plasma or plasma-like products, but just having that in there was a non-negotiable. Additionally, at that time, we put an antimicrobial back in. We used Mecadox for the enteric challenge. As we progressed through this process, the enteric challenges disappeared, so we switched to more of a respiratory drug with a shorter duration, and now today we are antibiotic-free again in our nurseries. So jumping into 2017, here's where we've got some data to show intervention differences. So at the beginning, we switched and put a lactation medication in. Tried different things, different applications. I'll show you where we settled and what the data showed on that. Then the detergent, there's a very significant drop in mortality with application of detergent, and we really focused on alkaline detergents for that. You see another significant drop with the pre-wean vaccine. So we didn't change our vaccination protocol, we just moved it earlier. So everything was done in farrowing. And then lastly, as things really settled, we're maintaining around that 275, could start doing the ventilation and management changes. So the data I have here is on it's a Pulmotil that we applied in lactation to sows. So we did some diagnostics, found some MSUS circulating in our sow herds, knew we were suffering some influenza challenges and parasuis. These farms were mycoplasma positive. So that was the reasoning for using this drug. And this is a trial we did where we applied Pulmotil to farrowing rooms and then followed the wean pigs through our trial. So the pigs themselves weren't treated with anything. It was just the sows given Pulmotil through the duration of farrowing. Big things to point out here would be this is just for nursery. We did measure all the way through finishing. But at weaning, start weights were dramatically different. So whether or not it's related, the Pulmotil caused the wean weight difference, or Pulmotil actually reduced our mortalities in treats, hard to tease out, but we did see a difference in start weight. And this has been repeatable throughout, different meds, but it's about a ½ pound heavier when we're running some type of medication and lactation. And a lot of that, I think, attributed to the MSUS and lactation ability. But big differences we saw in the nursery pigs themselves were the percent deads and pulls. I know it's really small, but it was over a percent decrease in deads. And then if you combine those together, it was almost a 2% decrease in deads and pulls just with this sow farm application. And then a big one for us, we're always looking to be more judicious with antibiotics and treatments. So our number of treatments per pen dropped by about 15 treats. And then our med costs in our per pig per pen was 10 cents less. And all of this was just the sow application. So to jump into the detergent step, these are nice brand new nurseries, plastic floored, state of the art, everything. But we didn't have a really good focus on cleaning in between turns. So it's this 6-week nursery turn, we're getting it turned really quickly. And you go in there and you look at the floors and, hey, we just built this, a few weeks ago and the floor's already stained. What's going on? So we opted to add in an alkaline detergent in order to break up biofilms. the change was almost immediate. By breaking up those biofilms, our enteric disease pressure completely went away. Zero rotavirus, zero E. coli. I've never seen anything like it just through a sanitation process. We did have a dedicated crew that went through, and they do all of our nurseries, but this is done every time, and we audit it. So pretty simple: remove organic material, use an alkaline detergent, power wash, inspect, disinfect, dry and downtime. So the disinfectant, we were still already using a disinfectant, so we didn't change any other step. The only step we changed was the detergent and who was doing it and the inspection. So we'd have about a day down by the time the whole room was washed and ready to go, and when the next pigs went in, we'd have 1 to 2 days. So here's the difference. Through this, we had 340 barns that we trialed, which is over 420,000 pigs. So we feel that this difference was significant. We looked at strictly mortality, and when we used BioClean versus when we did not use BioClean, we dropped mortality by 1.15%. So value added at that, when we did this calculation, about 58 cents a pig. So we're maybe applying a little heavy, but it was only costing us 3 cents a pig to use the detergent. To us, it was a no-brainer. So this is still in place today, used nurseries, GDUs, every farrowing room. Another big change was our vaccine timing. Watching where's our mortality occurring, and is there other issues that we can address. We were on a traditional program with our circovirus and our ileitis vaccination. So we gave a shot at weaning, just prior to weaning, and then we do a booster 3 weeks later. So 3 and 6 week program, killed adjuvanted vaccine. It seemed like after we give that 3-week shot in the nursery, they're going off feed. Maybe we'd have an E. coli break or a parasuis break, but it just seemed that there was something going on with that vaccination. So we did go through we checked for maternal antibodies to circovirus, mycoplasma, Lawsonia before switching to this early pig program. But we opted to choose a 3-day shot. We were already picking them up for processing, so it was very easy to add a shot at processing. And then we still kept that shot at weaning. We were already picking them up at weaning, so we didn't add any additional labor. Actually, we reduced labor by not having that nursery shot. We were able to cut back people in the nursery because we're not having to give a vaccine. And again, 328 barns on trial for this, with barn as the experimental unit, looking at mortality, feed intake, adjusted feed conversion, and average daily gain. So with all 4 of those metrics, we saw a significant difference in favor of moving that vaccine back to the sow farm. So mortality was about 0.75% improvement, decrease in feed conversion, increase in gain, and increase in feed intake. They just didn't go off feed for that day. It made a huge difference in our performance. And since doing this, no E. coli, no parasuis breaks mid-nursery. So to jump into 2018, end of 2017, beginning of 18, that's really when the technology application started and the sow herd closures begin. So I'll go through that. That's a little bit more of the soft sciences and the details on what we did. But real quick, I'll jump to our data on stopping our PRRS vaccination. So we were doing a PRRS vaccine on arrival in the nursery. And through the use of these cameras, we were able to see the same phenomenon happening. So we'd load the nursery, we'd give them a shot, they were lethargic and didn't want to eat, started poorly, and so felt like that vaccination event was really causing some stress. Went through and did testing just to make sure we weren't having a high incidence of lateral PRRS. Don't want to pull the PRRS vaccine if we actually do need it, but had a really low incidence of lateral PRRS breaks in the nursery, so opted to pull that vaccination. So we examined mortality and feed conversion with this. And again, large sample size, 198 barns, but saw improvements in mortality. I think it was about half a percent. 0.5% on mortality, an improvement in feed conversion. So with the vaccine savings and the mortality difference, it was about 67 cents per pig. So this all couldn't have been possible if the Pillins hadn't made the investment in this new technology. So we opted to put cameras into all of our nursery rooms. So it's an 8-room hotel-style nursery. Every single room got a camera. We'd also put cameras around our critical control points. So, dead removal, load out, those types of areas also got cameras. But these, just one install above the door. We can power wash easily with them. So we've had these in place since 2017. They're still in place today. I can go to my phone, look and see what's going on in these barns. So this just shows where we put them in the rooms. So main observations were, hey, we're stressing these pigs and there's something wrong with air. So like I mentioned, we're filling these all in 1 week. To do that, we're having to commingle and fill over a couple days from multiple sources. So we would partially fill rooms. If we can't get a room filled in 1 day, there's 1,600 pigs in a room, so sometimes that doesn't always happen. We realized, hey, we're way over ventilating on this very first day. They were at 1 or 2 CFM. Found out with this, how tight these nurseries are and how few pigs are in there the first day, we're really closer to about a half CFM per pig. So then again, we also saw the vaccinations adding stress in the hours after the vaccine. So that was part of the impetus for putting those back in the sow farm and just removing the shots altogether. Other observations that we saw on our cameras, looking at our management practices. So we were big fans of grueling, and we felt, hey, we got to get these pigs started on water, so we had waterers dripping. But what it ended up doing was making a huge mess. The pigs would get in the pans, they'd plant them, they'd get wet, we were over-ventilating, they'd get chilled, and we ended up with these cold pigs that didn't want to eat, didn't want to start, and would scour. So way too much humidity, way too much wet pigs. So we went and, adjusted our grueling strategy, adjusted the pans, and didn't run drippers the first day. Made a huge difference on pig comfort. We also, not everything's cookie cutter, so we have a lot of our new nurseries that were built the same, but then others, smaller nurseries that, hey, we need to ventilate these differently. So we use this as a training tool to say, watch what's going on in your barn, read your pigs, and adjust accordingly. So specifically looking at what's going on with your inlets, any ceiling obstructions that would be affecting airflow, heaters, what are they set on? Are they 100% blowing too much and chilling pigs? What does it look like? What do the laying patterns look like when the heaters are running? Looked at doors and then attic pressurization. So I'll just quickly hit these. So brand new barns, nice new inlets, and realized with the cameras we were chilling pigs directly under the inlets. So these inlets, we went through and put bubble wrap along them to divert the air out laterally. We were having air drop straight down. There'd be gaps in between the louvers that would fall straight down on the pigs. They couldn't get away, and we were chilling them. So the addition of the bubble wrap and then also adding some caulking around the outside of the inlets, we're able to move air this way rather than straight down on the pigs. We apparently couldn't build a barn the same way every time, so all of our inlets are in different locations, feed lines are in different locations, and conduits were in different locations. And it was amazing how, a feed line really does affect your air movement. So try to adjust how we opened inlets, where inlets got open, where sick pens were placed in order to work around feed lines, water lines, and those types of things. And then when we built the remainders, we thought about these before doing any new construction. Kind of the last couple things we looked at were our doors. So we try to put larger pigs near the doors, but there are these big sliding doors, gaps this big, tons of air getting pulled through there, and in the winter that's cool air out in the hallway. We were chilling our nice big pigs sitting there. So we added weather stripping along the sides of the doors just to keep a nice tight seal, and that issue went away. One of the last things that we did was looking at attic pressurization. So on windy days, we saw that there was more chilling in the barns, and it seemed really repeatable, high wind, more piling of pigs. So our team went in, looked at velocity of air being taken in through the inlets versus what we expected to be removed from the fans, and actually more air was coming in the attic than we were pulling out. So we were pressurizing the attic, which was blowing air through the inlets down onto the pigs. So what we did was add shutter to the end of the barns just to relieve that attic pressure, and it pretty much eliminate, not completely, but pretty much eliminated that extra drafting during those high windy days. We were also seeing heater run times higher in the affected rooms. Just to touch on the heaters, when they got installed, everything was set at 100%. And so they were running a lot and blowing a lot of air, but it was cold air. So by reducing that heater setting down to 50%, it's running a little bit longer, but not as high, and it's warmer air coming out. So just something as simple as switching your heater down to 50%, or only running one heater. We had these two huge heaters per room. We really didn't need that. So only running one heater at 50% made a big difference. Lastly, we had a lot of caretakers go through. They go in and they do their temp readings, their humidity readings, and oh man, it's hot and it's humid in here. And what they really want to do is go adjust that min vent, right? They think, okay, if I just run a little more air, the humidity is going to be better. But we used our barn report software to look and see what's really happening, is that's what's going on in the barns. And interestingly enough, respiration from active pigs causes higher temp and high humidity. So our caretakers would go in, do chores, then do their readings, and everything was elevated. So they were adjusting inlets and adjusting min vent based on an artificial elevation of respiration rate. So I think too, by saying, hey, don't adjust anything based on after you've done chores, made a big difference. We were able to keep a more consistent environment throughout the day and overnight on these pigs. So then just a few of the management changes we did. I mean, a lot of this is pretty just straightforward, doing the right thing for the pig, but this just illustrates, hours after weaning, not a ton of pigs start on feed right away. So it does take, 24 to 48 hours really to get pigs up and going. So this is the area where we're going to focus on. We load pigs, we're going to get them up, 4 times a day, make sure that they know what feed is, do some mat feeding, and really just spend some intensive time in there working with the pigs rather than pulling pigs or treating pigs. It's more, hey, let's just get them up and eating. So again, getting pigs up 4 times a day with mat feedings. We did a small trial looking at whether or not we mat fed, and we're about a pound heavier in our groups where we did mat feed versus where we did not mat feed. So this is just additional data showing mortality percentage at the end of the nursery turn. So this was a 38-day turn, and significant decrease in mortality just by mat feeding. So didn't hit on this, but end of 2018 is kind of when we did most of our changes. But since then, we have been looking at how do we continue to improve mortality? How do we continue to be better? So one thing we did was increase wean age through addition of farrowing rooms. So this isn't our data, but this would mimic what we're seeing. But shooting really for that 23 days of age to minimize weight loss post-weaning. The more they eat, the older they are, the more they eat, better start they get, and then shorter days on feed and finishing too. Another big change we did was, once we kind of got all this stuff refined, the root causes identified of why the mortality was so high, it allowed us to go in and be better and smarter about what we're treating and when, and targeting our therapies. So we were running feed meds still routinely just because we saw a mortality difference. So went in and did a lot of diagnostic workups, and with the commingling, seeing a lot of respiratory stuff post-weaning. So at that time, opted to use talithromycin and saw a decrease in mortality of 1.72%. This is a small subset, so it's not necessarily repeatable. That difference isn't seen every time, but it's pretty close to that. And so that's about 70 cents per pig just in mortality costs, which covered the use of the drug. By using this, we pulled all feed meds out of the nursery. So then just to show our antibiotic usage and goals through this process, in 2019, we kind of had kept things pretty consistent, and that's when we started scaling back our med usage. We were at 10.6 grams per pig marketed, so that would be anything applied to finishing, nursery, injectables, water meds. This year, our goal is to keep injectable treatments the same, pull all feed meds out, and then with the addition of that talithromycin, we'll be looking at about 0.39 grams of antibiotic per pig marketed, is the goal anyway, on healthy flows. One last thing we looked at, just to kind of jump into finishing, was stocking density. So through this process, you know, always your flow, I'm sure you guys have them too, but your flow guys want to maximize space. So we saw more and more pigs going into the nurseries, more and more pigs going into the finishers, and that graph up there on the upper right, it shows our stocking density versus mortality. So I don't know if you can see the R squared, but it's like 0.99. So there was a very direct correlation between barns we stocked heavy and the mortality. So we did a field trial looking at 6.7 square feet versus 7.2 square feet, and this was a wean to finish trial. So we had similar nursery stockings in order to match a nursery room to a finisher room. But huge differences just in that 5 square foot difference. So for days on feed, you know, almost 4 fewer days on feed, 0.04 greater average daily gain, feed conversion improvement of 0.02, feed intake was higher, and then mortality was down 1.25%. So because of this, we've also looked at how we're filling barns, what do we need to do with flow. Still a lot of work to do here, but this is just kind of our initial workup into our finishing livability. So key takeaways for growing pigs would be try something and record changes. If we hadn't had Jim standing there and saying, hey, we got to fix this, we're pulling it all back and finding root cause, I don't think we would have had the success that we had. If we hadn't recorded the changes, we wouldn't have been able to go back and pull that data either to drive decisions. Additionally, sow health, you know, doing some of those closures. I didn't touch on it. I'll kind of jump into sow health after this, but that I think was a key piece. Sanitation in facilities. New nurseries with good sanitation makes a huge difference on the ability to raise a pig. 4, removing those stressful events. So pulling out that vaccine event, you know, both vaccine events, and trying to keep pigs comfortable was a big deal. Utilizing technology. So that technology told us the pig wants to be warm, dry, draft-free. And then lastly, just meeting the pig's needs. You know, what we had signs up all over saying, read the pig, what's the pig telling us? And really that was what drove us to make these changes and make assessments. Do I have time to, am I doing okay? Okay. So I do want to touch a little bit on female livability because we applied what we saw in our commercial nurseries to our gilt development, and I think it's made a significant impact on our sow and gilt mortality. So first key piece of this was just benchmarking. It was really hard to track, you know, gilts. Sometimes we'd shove them into farms as isoweans, we'd shove them in as feeder pigs. It was really difficult to get this data out and understand what's happening. And a lot of times they get ignored. Maybe they're not in your record keeping software, and who knows where they ended up. So first, let's do some benchmarking and see where we're at. Then review the system changes. So what have we done differently through gilt development and sow management? And then can we quantify the performance of those gilts? So where this all started was, you know, we do a quarterly evaluation of our sow mortality, and starting back in, this is 2017 on the far left, where we were seeing a steady increase in sow mortality. So our system was at 14.5% with 4% prolapses, and just really we're not happy. I mean, I think, you know, industry was seeing this as well, and the trend pretty much continued until about 2019, 2020. Sow mortality started decreasing, pop started decreasing. So today we're now at 10.5% sow mortality and our 1.5% with our prolapse rate. I don't think we did necessarily anything special at the sow farms. You know, trying to review what could have impacted this. So was it gilt management, culling rate, replacement rate, health, sanitation? You know, sanitation protocols were the same. We're using the detergent step. You know, nothing changed out in the G barns. That we didn't feel like that was it. Health is always up and down. We did some sow farm closures, but heck, our PRRS positive, myco positive farms at 6% sow mortality, and our naive farm was at 18% sow mortality. So didn't really feel like health challenges were the root cause of this. Replacement rate stayed fairly static. Culling rate, the quickest way to reduce sow mortality is to get more cull loads, right? But culling rate stayed pretty much the same. The only thing that changed during this process was our gilt development. So touch on our stocking density and how we were flowing it, and then I'll show what we've got for growth rate and then herd entry and retention values since we made some changes. So our historic GDU structure would be to bring pigs into sow farms as isoweans. We had attached developers, and nursery conditions were just the same that we had in our commercial pigs. Got thrown into a nursery with very little sanitation, very little attention to ventilation or management. Was run continuous flow, and kind of whenever the manager decided to bring them out into the developer part of the GDU, they did. And so we ended up with an overstocked, continuous flow, poorly managed gilt developer. They were single source, so we'd take one multiplier to one sow farm, but if that multiplier didn't have pigs that week, we'll just grab from this other multiplier. So it was single source, but multiple different sources going in. Fast forward to our current GDU structure. So we've made some intentional changes to do off-site gilt development, but bringing them in as isoweans. So that was really key, is we want to have control of these pigs from the beginning as isoweans. We've got 3 different multipliers that we're using. We're going to commingle all these sources right away, get it over with, where we've got some intensive management, and then we can use these gilts at any farm we want to. And then running our GDUs is all in, all out. So when we were using our this bottom rung here is our on-site nursery finisher development. Stocked at 3 square feet, probably finished at around 8.5 square feet by the time we pulled them out, but you wouldn't know because they're swinging gates and moving pens. But we were averaging around 8% wean to finish mortality on our gilts. Not overly happy with that performance. Once we switched to off-site gilt development, where we had better management, better sanitation, all in, all out, and not having the health challenges of the sow farm, exposure to sow farm bugs, we saw a huge reduction in mortality. We were down to 5.4% wean to finish, and we were able to stock them better. Stock them and leave them, not do a ton of moving. They're getting placed anywhere from 3.1 to 3.7 square feet as isoweans, and then by the time they get pulled out of the finisher, they may have anywhere from 11 to 14 square feet. So just look at our attrition rates and what we are breeding now that we've switched this. Wean to ship mortality was 5.4%. The percent that we brought into the farm that didn't end up with a service was 7.8%. So really, from weaning to breeding, we're breeding 87% of the animals we've weaned. So not even going in and doing a selection, but 87% selection rate. So that made a huge difference on our gilt replacement rate too. When we've got a ton more gilts living and being eligible for selection, can turn the herds a little bit faster and be more judicious. So since we've made changes, big picture of this is we've seen a 3-week improvement. They're cycling 3 weeks sooner. They're hitting 300 pounds at 27 weeks instead of 30 weeks. So we got some opportunity, probably need to be mating a little bit sooner, but our goal is to mate between 300 and 325 pounds, and we're able to do that at 27 weeks of age. So key things that we want to target for our gilts through this livability improvement are first estrus between 24 and 27, breed them between 27 and 30 at that 300 to 325 pound target, and we need to be breeding over 85% of the gilts we wean. So key takeaways would be the off-site, all in, all out GDUs, using consistent gilt sources, and then through the gilt development, higher survivability, better growth, better reproductive health, which I believe is what's causing our increased lifetime livability and improvement in sow mortality. So the key takeaways: consider your whole system for the root cause, do trial and error, document what you do, and lastly, read the pig. All right, any questions?
All right, we have time for one quick question for Christine. Does anybody have a question?
First vaccination was modified live review.
It was modified live, yes. Yep. And I don't know that it was necessarily the vaccine itself. You know, when you go in and you crowd all the pigs, I think it's really just the stress of crowding.
Okay, please join me in thanking Dr. Mainquist Wiggum for her time today. That was really good. I wish you could talk more. I'm interested in it.
Should be questions?
Yeah. All right, well,
Who's the next one? Got it. Yeah, thank you.
thank you.